Do you have a problem with pirates? Consistently disabling parts of your ships, locking down your own hulls as they're trying to take it, leaving scrap, messes, mechanics everywhere, both in the sense of the parts and the people, leaving a dangerous minefield of debris and Kessler syndrome waiting to happen. So how do you get that nefarious pirate off in the distance at the end of a cluttered hangar bay in 0G? Why, with the Blackbeard, of course. Hi, hello, and welcome to IPS-N's aggressive solution to piracy, Blackbeard. Welcome to the first license video, which will probably be organized based off the manufacturer in a playlist. Blackbeard first, alphabetically, and then maybe modules? I don't know. But the licenses themselves, because we briefly referenced the chassis within the manufacturer video, and that left a very violent message. And don't get me wrong, that's not gonna change after this. It's similar to the Caliban in that front, where it's just aggressively violent. All right, enough with that. License levels. The equivalent of leveling up with Lancer, both adding talents to your pilot and some of their basic skills, but also getting a license, or at least a level of one. All the manufacturers have different licenses based around a specific chassis, which you get at license level 2. The rest of it are the separate parts for it. And the great thing about this is that of all the parts we list outside of everything from the main chassis, you can mix and match on any frame you want. So, SEKHMET, which we'll talk about near the end, yeah, that can be on anything. But even though you get at 2, let's start with the chassis itself that the license is based around, the Blackbeard. So when it comes to an individual chassis, there are actually a lot of different stats to kind of keep track of. So to simplify it a bit, just know that it's a slim frame meant for melee combat, and here's it compared to the Everest. So you can look at this table and essentially enter in a character sheet what you know. Get a good look at it? I mean, you can even take a picture of it or screenshot or take notes or go look it up. But in general, its highs, its lows compared to the standard, or at least the mechanical standard on what you start with. Outside of just base stats, you have your weapon mounts of 1 flex, 1 main, and 1 heavy. For the chassis traits, first you have the grapple cable, which I actually got wrong in the IPS-N video. Wrong somewhat, it's just a different ability instead of the base grapple hook. So the grapple cable itself has a range of 5, a contested grapple check, and instead of pulling an enemy towards you, you actually pull yourself towards the enemy. So back to that scenario with the pirate across the hangar, you're throwing yourself past all the Kessler syndrome. You know, if ranged weapons are hazardous, why not just take the melee attack and send it to the enemy? Its next trait, the lock-kill subsystem, allows it to have additional bonuses when grappling, so, you know, grapple, there might be a bit of a theme. And with this, you can boost and take reactions while grappling a separate target, which is actually really good, at least action economy-wise. And for its last trait, a negative, exposed reactor, which mechanically all this does is give a difficulty dice to all engineering checks and saves. Because as described, a lot of its initial design actually involved slimming down its frame so it wasn't a bulky target. The issue was it left a lot of vital systems open. Now for its core power, this is the Snake Grapple. It's the same thing as your grapple cable, range 5, you hit them, it's 2d6 kinetic damage. If they fail, they are knocked prone and dragged towards you. Oh, on top of the prone thing, they are immobilized until the end of the next turn, which sucks. And hey, on a success, they still take half damage. Now we're back to the license itself. Now an important thing to note is that when it comes to a chassis, you can't actually intermingle the components of that specific chassis, so those individual traits and those stats. Instead, you actually just get the rest of the components from the license. Think of the chassis as a base foundation you're speccing into. The rest are fun bits of equipment, traits, perks, etc. So the first of those components, the chain axe. We're starting strong. As a threat range of 1, it does 1d6 kinetic damage. However, when it actually scores a hit, or a critical hit in specific, the target is shredded, leaving them very, very vulnerable to other damage, at least for that one turn. The weapon also has the reliable tag of 2, meaning that even if you miss, you at least did 2 damage because even a grazing blow from the weapon is enough to damage. And of course, the description of the weapon itself, outside of those basic stats, it is a chain axe. It is a chainsaw axe blade on a mech. Like, the more we talk about this, the more this makes more sense. Designed initially for, you know, the occasional cutting of wires, components, broken bulkheads, and then also the biological factor, because hey, aggressive anti-piracy, you don't want the chainsaw coming down on you. Oh boy, next one's an interesting one, equipment-wise. So first, beginning with the description of this one, synthetic muscle netting, a spray-on synthetic muscular structure, which, wow, just, which decays, by the way. It doesn't last forever. The advice in use is to keep it within internal components and regularly clean it out so the synthetic decay doesn't occur. Nasty, but allows for some crazy stuff. Namely because it really amplifies, almost like an ant, the ratio of physical body to strength. When you grapple or ram a larger target than you count as the same size, and when you grapple or ram an equal or smaller target than you count as a size even larger. And another side benefit, your lift and drag weight are doubled. Level 2 of the license, so your chassis, and then the next component. Bristle Crown Fletchet Launcher, an auxiliary close quarter combat weapon, which really is being generous in calling it a weapon, as it's more just a very violent distance porcupine. As embedded in various parts of the chassis are several dispensers or launchers that fire these fletchet rounds, just in a sphere around you. Part of the benefits of this is that even though it counts as a weapon, you can still use it on attacks and stuff, but importantly ignores range penalties within close quarters combat, so, grappling potentially. So within this burst, after you're heading to go and grapple a target or you're being surrounded by enemies, which this doesn't have a recharge, you can just spam this. It's a burst one, so everyone just around you, and then 1 kinetic damage. However, with said grappled target from earlier, and also biological targets, specifically calling out infantry in the description of it, it does 3 solid damage. So rip and tear, and just explode over an infantry squad. Now for a ridiculous one, the Nanocarbon Sword. A heavy melee, as IPS-N puts it, a new twist on an old classic. So you see, it's a sword. It's just a sword. Threat 2, however, which is nice, that increased range, it does 1d6 plus 4 damage with reliable 3. And the description itself, to add up to the fact this is license level 2 and you already have a potential of 10 damage out the gate on just this one blade. The blade itself, while seeming simple on the outside, the pommel itself is extremely complex. As you hit a target, it saves that data out somewhere in the OmniNet and also locally within the sword. And with that data gathered in the middle of combat, it begins to change the molecular structure of the end of the blade. The molecular structure to sharpen the blade as you're hitting someone, specifically sharpening it to be effective against them, hence the reliable. And plus 4. It's a big, scary sword. Alright, well, level 3, we've talked a lot about its murder potential already. It seems we have some utility items here. Reinforced cabling, 2 system points, allows for some fun things. Namely, your grapple cable now works on objects, or locations. It doesn't have to be a specific enemy target that you drag yourself towards. You can actually latch onto walls, onto ceilings. Namely, IPS-N wise, this was to be used in 0G or, decaying ships and hulks. But really, it's just Spider-Man grappling or swinging around. Though while you can hold onto the walls and ceiling, the moment you're knocked prone, you just fall again, or lose hold of it. The cable rapidly being able to deploy, redeploy, and change what direction it's heading in by the fact every 30 meters, if I remember correctly, it has a separate discharge and detonation that releases a new grapple hook. It's so ridiculous. Also, it's that cabling on the belt area. Though we didn't get out of offense yet, because we have drag down. Another option for the grapple, another target within 5, you hit them, you then make a contested grapple check, the loser, in a brief, very threatening form of tug of war against Blackbeard, the loser falls prone. So if you're playing the Blackbeard, it might be a bit shameful falling on your own ability, but then man, that poor pilot in the other chassis. And speaking of poor pilot, you as well in this next one, the last thing in level 3 of the license, SEKHMET. The SEKHMET NHP, a very, very, very violent NHP which develops and usually tends towards a personality of an aggressive attitude and heavy use of dark humor, which really adds up to that Horus poster. Nicknamed Berserker Systems, it's really accurate. So in general, this is probably a bad example to have as our first NHP on this, talking about individual chassis, but whereas with most other NHP, they look over a specific system or help co-pilot or look over specific weapons or, aid piloting, the SEKHMET NHP is so aggressive and violent that the way IPS-N has it set in that you activate it is it's always active, you just let it take the reins, and it will function your chassis without you, that if you die, it will just go. That is if it's already free. And not cascading free, you've just given it control of the entire chassis. Bonus-wise, what that means is that every melee critical hit adds an extra d6 of damage. Once per round, you can get a free skirmish action with a melee weapon, so harder hitting attacks, more attacks, and it specifically has instructions for how SEKHMET acts. Namely, it's attacking the nearest thing it can see. It's the nearest target. It is going to kill them. It will not use ranged weapons, it is only melee weapons, and it will keep killing. It will keep killing until you shut it down internally or the mech's brought down. Adding to its lethality, something that doesn't come up unless you have a high-ranking technophile is the fact that SEKHMET benefits from your talents. It benefits from your talents early on. that is something not commonly found between NHP and AI or CompCon units, just general equipment. You can make a blender. It's an NHP that gets more violent and dangerous the more your own character is dangerous in those categories. As instead of just co-piloting or allowing you to be more violent on your own, it's looking over, it's being trained by you. It's looking at how you're dealing out murder, how you're equipping it. So, you know, don't treat your SEKHMET harshly, don't give it a sadly all-ranged build, SSC, fuffy garbage. Give it a hearty, standard, well-wrought IPS-N creation to go against piracy and lots of melee weapons. Oh, by the way, it cannot determine friend from foe. Just making that very clear. When I said nearest target, it does not determine friend from foe. If you are living, if you are an active machine, if it perceives you as having a separate bit of agency compared to a rock, it will kill it. Though that's Blackbeard, the really scary, and I mean, come on, yes, I use this image a lot as jokes and memes, but it's this. It is this. It's blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne, Chaos Knight, chainsaws, blood, skull. If you're looking to play a melee blender, there are some other options as well, but Blackbeard is definitely the first one that steps up to the plate. It is a violent machine of slaughter and destruction because IPS-N had a pirate problem. It's not looking for defense. Its solution is to have no more pirates. Well, we're at the end of the video, and we've got a new format. We're gonna see how this ends up working out, or what future chassis might look like. Also, potentially video-wise, having a small in-between video and just role-playing cascades might be fun, or also talking through the personality of the ones you can find in-game. NHP, that is. Just because we talked about SEKHMET and how it might act, and it's describing its personality, and that one Horus poster. Outside of all that, thank you for watching, thank you to my patrons, and have a nice day.